did get a note that the panelist video isn't showing. So we want to make sure that we can see our panelists as they're answering questions in a bit. But for now, I'm going to go through a few slides and give you all an overview. Okay, if you could, we'll go through that then. So Blake is a 3-campus school system. We've been around for about 100 years or a little bit longer than that. We have been the merger of different schools coming together in those 100 years. One of the things we like about having 3 campuses is that we can really meet the students where they are in terms of their learning needs. Physically moving spaces when you change divisions is really fun for students, and it gives them more chances to be leaders, to make new friends. So this photo that you see on your screen right now is our Hopkins campus, where we have one of our lower schools, which is grade pre-K to 5, as well as our middle school, which is grades 6 through 8. This is the new entry hall on the Hopkins campus, and we also have most of our athletic facilities on the Hopkins campus, things like our ice arena, our swimming pool, our track and field, as well as our performing arts center. So this would be where all of the major school productions happen. This is a photo of our Highcroft campus in Wayzata. The Highcroft campus is geared for students in grades pre-K through 5 and specifically serves their learning needs. And this is our upper school campus is on Kenwood Parkway, and it's called Northrop Campus. It's on the Kenwood Parkway in Minneapolis near the Walker Arts Center. So students will transition to this campus once they reach the upper school grades. I just want to take a moment to talk to you about the classroom experience here at Blake. One of the things we're really known for is our excellent faculty. So whenever we need to do any hiring, we make sure to do a global search for candidates, definitely a national search, if not a global search. Blake faculty really love to teach here. As you can see from the slides, about 77% of our faculty members have advanced degrees. We really try to have curious and engaged students who come to school excited to learn, who think that learning is cool. And I'm sure our volunteers will let you know about the supportive relationship between the family and the school. There are also a lot of professional development opportunities for our faculty. Last summer, they participated in 29 summer curriculum grants. These projects included developing a new advisory curriculum for 6th grade, looking at the evolving upper school Chinese curriculum, and the onboarding and support of employees of color. So they've done a lot of different work through professional development. And then our faculty is also encouraged to take sabbatical. So if they have a particular project that they're passionate about, they're allowed to take sabbatical in order to pursue those interests. Talk to you a moment about Blake's mission and values. Wanted you to really know that our goal is to develop students who want to be lifelong learners who live purposeful lives as global citizens. The core values at Blake are respect, love of learning, integrity, and courage. This slide is really about our commitment to pluralism. When we talk about a commitment to pluralism, we're really trying to talk about welcoming people to the community from a wide range of backgrounds, identities, and life experiences. Our goal is that we will develop understanding across differences in an inclusive environment. We want everyone to feel like they can belong and contribute. So some of the markers of that are on this slide here. We have more than 35 languages spoken at home for our Blake students. 22% of Blake students receive need-based financial assistance. We consider that a marker of socioeconomic diversity. 36% of students identify as a student of color, and Blake students come from all over the metro area, 55 different cities and towns. Another thing that we really like to talk about when we talk about our commitment to pluralism is the Office of Equity and Community Engagement. That office is, they do a lot of different things, but one thing is they will operate affinity groups. They provide community education opportunities through something called the Equity Lab. We have a pre-K through 12 director of equity and instruction who works with our faculty on their annual intercultural competency goals. Also, this person looks at all the materials we use when we teach in the classroom to make sure that they're reflective of our school's values. And then another part that falls under the Office of Equity and Community Engagement is our service learning, and talk a little bit more about that on our next slide. So in terms of trying to educate students who are going to succeed in a globally connected world. We think that starts locally. So as you can see from this side, our students participate in 40 or with more than 40 local community organizations doing different service projects every year. Something that we're really proud of is that we usually offer 2 to 3 credit-bearing global immersion opportunities every year, and those are for students who have finished 8th grade. So between 8th grade and senior year, students are able to participate in these global immersion trips. They are for credit, so they do involve a week of classroom work, usually about 20 days in country, and then a week of classroom work when the students return. So examples of previous trips have been to Rwanda, to Cuba, to Vietnam, to Sierra Leone. And this summer, very excited to say, we have 10 students signed up to go to Costa Rica. During the trip to Costa Rica, they're going to be studying Indigenous rights and ecology, and also another trip this summer to Iceland and Amsterdam to study climate change. And then one other thing to point about those trips is that if a student receives financial assistance to attend Blake, they are able to participate in one global immersion experience that will be covered by their financial assistance as well. So just want to talk to you a little bit about kind of trying to develop the whole child at Blake. So we really do want students to feel comfortable participating in arts and athletics to really complement their academic experience. So as you can see on the slide, 45 different concert and drama productions happen every year. And 83% of upper school students choose to participate in athletics. In the middle school, what that looks like in terms of arts is there's 2 requirements. One is to be in a performance-based art. So that will be band, choir, or orchestra. The other art that middle schoolers will participate in every year, they have a quarter each of visual art, wood studio, theater, and computer science. The middle schoolers do 2 main productions a year. In the fall, they do a play, and in the spring, they do a musical. But in between that, there's lots of club opportunities to get involved as well. So there's an improv club for students who might be interested in theater but aren't ready to be on the stage. Blake sports start in 7th grade. We do have a no-cut policy. So even if your child is interested in trying a sport, they will be welcome to participate in that sport. Just this is probably a little bit far off for all of us thinking about middle school, but just wanted to briefly touch on our college counseling program. We really do have a nationally recognized college counseling team. They attend conferences, do a lot of training, try to stay on the cutting edge of what's happening in terms of college counseling. They also provide a lot of community education opportunities for those of us in the community. They do seminars on affording college athletics. They publish a monthly newsletter. And then in the student's sophomore and junior year here at Blake, the students will participate in the college seminar, which helps to explain the college admission process as well as talks to them about preparing for tests. So this is just a fun slide that shows over the past 4 years, some of the top colleges that Blake graduates have attended. The college counseling motto is that college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. So that's why you can see such a wide variety of different colleges and universities on this slide. This is just a fun shot of all of our students in their college sweatshirts. This is a few years old, just to reassure you all. So as the students aren't wearing masks, but they look pretty happy. Here's a sample middle school schedule to get into some of the details about our middle school. We rotate through a block schedule over an 8-day period. So as you can see, we also call it a cascading schedule. The students will have their main subjects 4 times over an 8-day rotation. And you can see science on day 1, day 3, day 5, etc. So they don't have their classes at the same time every day, which is actually really fun. It keeps the day very interesting, and every day is a little bit different. We do build in a morning break. In the middle of the day, we have a lunch and recess block. I'm sure our parent volunteers can tell you more about that, what their kids like to do at recess. But it's still pretty neat to have that downtime in the middle of the day. The afternoon, you'll see a block called tutorial. That's a really neat time because that's when student clubs meet, or students can go and meet with their teachers. So if they're working on a particular project, they have time to go and meet with their teachers to discuss that, or if they have a test coming up in a particular subject, they can ask for help from their teachers. Here's just a bit more about Blake clubs. As you can see, we have more than 25 options. These are actually just the middle school clubs. There are other clubs available in the upper school. Clubs are student interest driven. And so if a student has a passion or an interest and they can find an advisor for their club, which is usually easy to do, they can actually start their own club as well. So a lot of, as I said, there's affinity-based groups, interest-based groups, things that are just fun. So it's a wide variety of different choices. So great, we're going to start with question and answers. I'm happy to take a look at the Q&A and see what we have so far. Please use the Q&A function on your screen if you could. I know you're all tired of hearing from me, so I'm excited to hear from our parents. So maybe we'll just start with a couple basic questions and then see what our audience is also interested in finding out. I guess the first thing that we might think about is when you're thinking about entrusting your child's education to Blake, what are some thoughts you have as parents? Maybe Ray, we could start with you. Like when you were thinking about entrusting your daughter to Blake, what was that process like for you? And how has it gone for her?
Yeah, no, that's a good one, Beth. So maybe just a little bit of background. So Suna was at Lake Country Montessori, and so we were kind of looking for an environment that is similar to Lake Country as we moved forward. And we've visited Blake and a few other schools, but Blake was, that environment of just, this Montessori environment, they kind of foster this love of learning, and as we kind of just thought Blake and just saw the kids and some of the activities they were involved in, we felt it was just the right environment. I mean, just this, essentially just love of doing work and love of learning, that Montessori kind of environment. And so, yeah, so that's essentially what kind of pushed us towards Blake.
Mm-hmm. And for Kelly and maybe then Lola as well, could you let us know where your students went to school before coming to Blake? I think you might have mentioned it in the intro, but for anyone who joined us late, and how the school year has been going so far for your children.
Sure thing. Hi, I hope everyone can hear me. I was on a different device earlier and having some connection issues. So I'm Kelly Basjan. I have 2 sixth graders at Blake this year, Miller and Sully, twin boys. And our experience, we were at a public school in Edina, and we knew that one of our kids needed a little bit more academic pressure. He needed somebody to kick his butt a little bit. He wasn't trying as hard, and as we knew, he wasn't meeting up to what we knew he could do. And so we went and toured Blake, thinking that out of the from our experience or from our perspective, it was all about fit for the kids. And so it wasn't that we were going to find one school that would be a fit for both of them. They're twins, and we treat them very differently. They have very different learning needs and different personalities and different interests. And so we went thinking that this was going to be a great fit for Sully. And we went on the tour and we got in the car and Miller said, "Wait, Mom, can I go there too?" And we're like, "Oh, okay, we didn't expect that." And so I asked the kids why, and it was a great conversation. They talked about the teachers stepped out of their classrooms when we were on our tour and came and said hello to them. People high up in the school stopped and greeted us and asked us what our interests were. They loved hearing about the clubs, but they both got a sense that they could get their specific needs met at Blake, even though their needs are really different from each other. And that has certainly been our experience. So we've been really pleased. And like I said, I have 2 really different kids, and both of them are just thriving.
So we were at Armitage Montessori in Minneapolis, which is a magnet school in Minneapolis. And, Oscar he's interesting. He's a really academically advanced and smart kid, and he wants to do well. One of the tours that we went to, I think Joe Silvestri, when somebody asked, like, what are you looking for in students? And then he said, we're looking for students who want to learn and think that doing well in school is cool. And I never would have guessed that statement would resonate with my kid, but it did. You know, he likes playing video games as much as any other middle school boy, but that statement really resonated with him. The thing about Oscar is he also has ADHD and he's got inattentive type. We call him our absent-minded professor. So, you know, remembering to turn stuff in, keeping his binder organized, you know, he can bang out a science test like it's nothing. He hears it once, he can remember it, but turning in his science homework is another story. And so I just felt like there were going to be a lot of good tools for us at Blake to help him kind of figuring out what are the tools that he needs for that executive function where his ADHD presents. And one of the things, I don't know, this is in the question, but that I've been happy with is he really feels like his teachers want him to do very well. And they support him, like the tricks and tips that he needs to just remember to like, do your homework, turn it in, you know, like little things like that. He takes a test and it, you know, at Blake, there have been many times where kids are allowed to retake the test. And so for Oscar, as he was figuring out those tools about how to make sure that the test scores reflect what he knows and not his ADHD, that was really important for him early on.
Yeah. And thank you, Lola, for that point about talking about interacting with the teachers as well. I'm wondering if we could maybe, you know, hear from our other panelists. Or, you know, have you had any interactions with your children's teachers? Are they responsive? What have those interactions been like?
Yep. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'll take this. Yeah. As Lola said, the interactions with the teachers have just been great. Suna, you know, is also we call her the chief executive of our house. I mean, she's like an A-type person as well, and basically just reaches out to the teachers all the time. I mean, like sends them emails. They're very responsive. You know, I don't know if we're gonna get into the details yet, but like the first class that they get into, you know, essentially is with their home teacher. And Suna just loves loves the home teacher, and basically essentially it's a you know about a 15-minute period where kids that are in a little pod and a little kind of get together and they talk to the teacher, talk about their day, and it's really Suna's favorite period.
Yeah. And Kelly, have you had any interactions with your boys' teachers, and how has that been for you as well?
Absolutely. You know, what Lola was saying about the teachers want them to succeed really resonated with me. And that's one of the things that has been a transition for my kids. Not that they didn't have wonderful teachers in the past, but the transition from lower school to middle school, regardless of what school you go to, it's a thing, right? It's a transition, and middle school is harder regardless. And the expectations of the kids to be independent and to have that executive functioning that Lola talked about are higher. And so it has been really helpful for my boys to understand they're going to screw up every once in a while, right? They're going to forget to hand in a homework assignment, or a few weeks ago, one of my boys was sick and he missed something. And then he's like, okay, I'm not going to get points for that. It's like, no, he reached out to the teacher, and he didn't realize it for like 3 weeks that he had missed an assignment. So he reached out to the teacher a few weeks late and said, I was homesick for 2 days. I didn't turn in an assignment. I'm sorry. What do I do? And the teacher said, turn it in tomorrow. It's okay. And so, you know, I would expect that the expectations of the children gets higher, you know, as they progress through middle school. But really in 6th grade here, we're feeling that support from the teachers where they want them to succeed. The other thing that I have found is that the teachers are highly responsive. They'll respond to any email that I send them. But what I've also really appreciated is that their preferred method of conversation is actually with the kids. So I've reached out once to a teacher and said, hey, my kid is kind of struggling here, doesn't really understand this assignment. And the teacher said, very respectfully, but the key message was, thanks, Mom, have your kid come talk to me. And so I appreciate that. There is absolutely openness, whether it's emailing the teachers, stopping by during recess, stopping by during the advisory period. for that open and honest conversation with the kids, and they're really there to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, and that's why I highlighted essentially Suna just takes care of herself, right? Like they you know, we interact with the teachers, but I would say is hardly, right? Just because there's a big encouragement for the kids to advocate for themselves, right? So
Yeah, that's, and I, as a someone who works there and a mom who had two boys go through the middle school, that's something you really I value as well, because the older they get, the more they need to advocate for themselves. So I have a senior in high school and a ninth grader in high school who came up through the middle school, and those skills that you all are talking about happening in the middle school are what make them successful in the upper school. Is what, when the work gets harder, you know how to use your resources, right? As a student, you know how to talk to your teachers, you know how to email your teachers. So that's what we're starting to have them develop as sixth graders, is a lot about self-advocacy to help them be successful high schoolers. We
You know, one of the things Oscar's teachers, a couple of them have done, which I've loved, is sometimes they BCC me on an email or CC me on an email to him. Which I was like, the first time Miss BA, who's got advisory with Suna and Oscar, the first time she did that, I was like, well, this is amazing. Thank you so much. Because then I wasn't a part of the conversation, but I knew the conversation was happening. So I could be like, hey, so what's going on with blah, 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 you know? And he would be like, oh, well, I'm gonna need about that today. So.
Right, yeah. And the next question we have from one of our guests is, what's the experience like for your students joining Blake in sixth grade? So if, you know, we've thought a little bit about the academic side, and perhaps this question is also going to get a little bit more to the social side, right? So can you just talk to, and it's such an unusual year as well, right? Of course, thankfully been in person, your children have been in person, which is great. But, you know, how's it been adjusting to a new community, making friends? How's that been for them? Who wants to go first? I don't know. Kelly, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up moving every few years, and so always going to new schools. And so as we were preparing to go to Blake, I talked to both boys and said, you know, being new is hard and it's an adjustment. And if the first few weeks don't go that well, you know, don't get down and give it a shot, and we'll keep going. And they came home the first week and they were like, what are you talking about? It's fine. It's great. Like I said, I have two really different kids, academically, socially, interests, personalities, and they both love it. They have found academically that the teachers are really supportive, as we talked about. And then friend-wise, you know, I was told by a friend who has older children at Blake that the new kids are kind of treated like celebrities at Blake, which I thought was funny. But coming in, they were really accepted, I thought, from day one. And with their different personalities, one of them has found a few kind of tight-knit friends that he hangs out with, more regularly. And one will come home and I'll say, who did you have lunch with today? Or who did you play with at recess? And it's 10 different kids on 10 different days. And that's great. But both have found that the kids are really kind and inclusive. And one of the things that I find funny is when I ask, you know, what lower school did these kids go to? Did they go to one of the Blakes, or, you know, did they go to different school? They have no idea. It's like the kids all just blended together. And I think that's really indicative of how they're all just kind of friends. And it doesn't matter what school you were at last year. And they're, from the experience of my kids, like I said, very different experiences, but both of them just say, Mom, the teachers are so nice and the kids are so nice. And I'm really happy about that.
Yeah. Lola, what would you say about that question?
Yeah, I've been amazed. I was really nervous for Oscar because he was starting at Blake and I think he knew one other kid from his baseball team, but no one from his school was coming to Blake with him. And, you know, I just remembered him starting at Armitage from kindergarten. He didn't have anybody from his preschool who went to Armitage with him. And I felt like, you know, he's a really nice kid. And so he always finds friends, but in kindergarten, I felt like it took him a little while before he found kind of a running buddy. And in anticipation about that, I was like, you know, it can be hard when you're new. And I was doing the same thing that Kelly was doing. And he, of course, was sort of brushing me off. Blake did a really good job, I think, in the first week focusing on building community. And they said that explicitly, like the first week is about building community. And that was great for Oscar. He has a huge cohort of boys. I mean, Kelly, I feel like we hear a little bit of a mix, right? Like it's this group of boys in the 6th grade class. There's a couple who I think he's with all the time, but it seems like, 15 to 20 kids at least who they're running with constantly. And, I was not sure how that would work with the pandemic, because it's not as easy to just hang out at somebody's house on the weekend right now, right? Because being inside and all that stuff. But they've seemed to have formed some really strong bonds, even just being at school. And that's made me really happy.
Yeah. Rima, one of our guests, has a question about, and this one, if you could all just kind of think about a bit. How do teachers deal with students who have different levels of mastery in different subjects? So this might be a little bit harder to answer as a parent. But it is, I think the second part of the question is, how do they meet each student's need in every subject? And have any of you had any of that experience where your children, maybe are more advanced, need a bit more, or maybe be a bit more support? How do they kind of level all of that out? Have you had any of you had any experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, this is super embarrassing, and I'll just say it. My son is doing terribly in Spanish, which is like, my husband is Mexican and I'm Puerto Rican, and we both speak Spanish and come from Spanish speaking families. So that's been a real slap in the face. But I think it's just we've had to sort of adjust to his aptitude for language. I will say again, shout out to the Learning Center at Blake and Mary Ellen, because, there are some aspects of that I think are tied a little bit to Oscar's ADHD. I'm also going to tell myself that to alleviate some of my cultural guilt, but they have been really helpful in helping us to figure out what's the better approach to helping him study for Spanish, because it is an anomaly from how he's doing everything else. So again, full disclosure.
Yeah.
Lola, we're in the same bucket with Spanish with Miller, so I'm going to hook them up.
Yeah. Ray, has there been any situations for your daughter of differentiating or, finding herself at a different level than her classmates?
Well, she's struggling a little bit with Spanish as well. It sounds like this is a so she did French at her lower school and wanted to do something different and so picked Spanish. It's just the extra help. I mean, the free blocks and Mr. Lee is always available. I mean, and then the other one is just all the online tools. I mean, there are like just a lot of online tools, where if the kid's just soon as motivated enough that she actually goes and works through some of the online material and like find ways of catching up. And I think it was either Lola or Kelly who mentioned earlier that there are opportunities for kids who maybe they don't do well in some tests or they don't do well in some homework, just doing some extra credit, extra work to kind of catch up. And so Suna takes advantage of that.
And then I'd like to just take a moment to point out the other side, and I'm not sure if any of our panelists have students who might be, more advanced learners, right? Sometimes the students need support, and you all have given good examples of how they receive that. And the other side of that might be, where they're a bit ahead of their classmates in a particular subject. And I think it really works both ways in the small class sizes, right? I think what it comes down to is ability to differentiate class, because we really have no more than 16 to 18 students in a class at a time. So if you're working on a writing assignment, and you can see, of course, our teachers are going to see a variety of difference in ability in writing, but they're able to individually, work with each student in a 70-minute block with 16 students. Everyone gets individual attention. And then there are, other things the kids can do if there's a subject they're particularly passionate about. They could be on the math team if they love doing math. They could be in the Knowledge Bowl. They could be on the robotics team. So there's academic ways as well to get, more enrichment outside of the classroom if that's also what students.
One thing I'll say about that, Beth, that I thought was great. So Oscar had his Miss BA for advisory and for English, and he needed to pick a new book, and she walked him over to like the 8th grade section to pick out a book. And she was just very subtle about it, but he noticed it. He was like, oh, he came home, Mom, Miss BA walking over to the 8th grade section to pick out a book. And, but what I appreciated about what she was doing is because she was kind of recognizing that he could handle something a little bit more complex, but she didn't make such a big deal out of it. It wasn't like it differentiated in the way of saying, okay, well, you're advanced and this group is here and this group is here. And so I think, it sort of, I think, avoids some competitiveness or some sort of noticing of who's doing what. And I appreciated her approach to that.
I think that's really cool. As I was mentioning, my boys have some different academic needs, and we thought that only Sully was going to be initially going to Blake. And what really, one of the things that drew Miller to Blake was when one of the English teachers came out and we were asking the question. Sully had traditionally been pulled out for English and math. And in the advanced program in the school we were previously at. And this English teacher said, I don't really know that we need that, because we can teach to the individual kids, Beth, like what you were saying, because the class sizes are so small, and they can just have, be working on different texts, and we will give them exactly like Lola, you're saying, those texts. What has been really interesting is in our previous school, English was not Miller's favorite subject. I think he was a little intimidated by his brother actually being pulled out and in special math, English. And Miller is thriving in English right now because his teacher has found a way to tap into what makes him tick as it relates to reading, which is really more of that conversation and character development and kind of deep thinking, if you will, rather than just kind of really fill in the blank quizzes. And so it's been awesome to see this transformation in him. And then Sully still has the love of it, but the bigger growth for us has been in Miller.
Yeah, I'll have to say the same. Suna loves math. It is and is really good. And so they the teachers just they to some extent they kind of push, they find a way of just teaching you up to your level. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of material. I mean, there's a lot of resources to kind of essentially teach up if it's needed. But I'll have to maybe make a shout out to like her absolute favorite is the makerspace. I don't know if anybody else is gonna talk a little bit about the makerspace, but there's just that block of time where Suna hangs out in this in this room and with 3D printers and a lot of other resources and is absolutely her favorite, right? So I don't know if Heather or Beth, you're gonna talk a little bit more about the makerspace, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to just mention it briefly too before we go on to our next question. And hopefully we're going to share something too within the next few weeks with all of you, kind of highlighting the makerspace. So we'll be happy to do that. We have a lot of great photos from that space, but it is designed to be where the kids their creativity can be unleashed. They have a 3D printer, they have a laser cutter, they make buttons, they make things out of cardboard. In the fall, they made masks out of paper. So really the idea is that there's technology, but there's also low tech things that the kids can do. And the main thing is they can't take an image, let's say off the internet, and print it. So if they want to do something in the laser cutter, they have to have an original piece of art. And then they can have that printed with the laser cutter. But we have students making chess sets, making puzzles to give as gifts. So just a lot of cool things happening in the makerspace. And as Ray mentioned, it's available during recess. There's a makers club for kids who are interested in doing makerspace activities, outside of recess. So it's been a purposeful effort on our part to expand that space, expand the offerings. We have 2 adults who help in there. So yeah, really, really great. And hopefully if your kids come to visit, they'll get a chance to see it or tour, but yeah. Quick question for all of you about any challenges your kids have experienced in middle school or you experienced as parents new to Blake. Can you think of anything that's been difficult?
I don't think it's specific, but I mean, the transition to middle school is hard because it's academically more rigorous. They have to exhibit a lot more executive functioning. They're not, they're treated more like young adults. And so that, I think there was a moment with Oscar when one of his teachers was emailing him, and eventually I got CC'd on an email and said to Oscar, like, why didn't you respond to these emails? And he's like, well, it just said, and he just referenced the subject. And I was like, Oscar, you have to click on the email and read the email. And he was like, I mean, like light bulb went on. He was like, oh, I mean, he just, it's dumb little stuff like that, where it's like the getting in the habit of sending and receiving emails with your teachers and actually checking your email, and then using the Canvas page to, stay on top of your assignments. So, he had to figure out a routine, and there was challenge associated with that. It wasn't so hard that he was like, there has never been a day where Oscar has come home and not said that school was awesome. And that was not the case before. So that has been new this year. He just really loves both the social and the academic aspects. But there are challenges just in terms of adjusting to middle school and sort of figuring out the routine.
I totally agree with that. We've had the same experiences. I feel a little bit like this is therapy. So thank you, Lola, for making me feel better about the experiences I'm having with my sixth graders. Totally agree with that. The other thing that I'll just be really honest about is, we've talked about friendships and kids, and my kids love their friends and love the students. And like I said, one of them has more of a few friends he hangs out with, and one has tons that he, depending on the day, but they're not neighborhood friends. And so that has been a change for us of, okay, they're not just riding down the block on their bike and meeting at the park. So it takes a little bit more effort. And I've talked to some older parents who say, right, and the more that the kids have phones, and then, the more independent they are, then they start to, that starts to not be as much of an issue. So I wouldn't say that's been a challenge or an issue for us. My kids don't feel sad about that at all. They feel really happy. And I think what Lola was saying earlier resonated with me, that like they feel so good about their friendships at school that then when they're coming home, they can just ride around the neighborhood and the bike with their neighborhood friends, right? And they're okay that those are different groups of kids. I worried about it a little bit, but it's a non-issue for them. And I would expect it'll only get better the closer friendships they develop, and then the more independent they become in coordinating their own activities.
Yeah. Ray, was there any challenges that you can think of that might have?
Maybe I think there was a question about COVID, right? So maybe I'll talk to that a little bit. Yeah, that has been a little challenging, right? So Suna is, is an only child, and kind of uses, like, school is one of those places where she kind of has a little bit slightly bigger social network. And and the COVID has made that challenging, not seeing the kids' face, and not seeing the teachers' faces and their reactions and things like that. It's pretty challenging. So if you to maybe add to Lola and Kelly's response, I mean, I would say, COVID has been essentially integrating into a new community with COVID has been challenging.
And
I agree with that. Beth, if I could add one thing, we had a really interesting experience with COVID a month or two ago, where one of our boys had a close contact. And so we got a note from the school, and it was so apologetic. I'm so sorry to inform you, your child had a close contact at school. And I would just say, I think the school has done a phenomenal job of doing the very best they can as with regards to COVID. So the kids are wearing masks. The only places where they have the close contacts are lunch. And so, the notification we got was on a Sunday night, and it was your child had a close contact on Thursday. And I'm like, who do you eat lunch with on Thursday? And my kid's like, I have no idea. And the
Oscar was
school-
one of them. He didn't have it, but they were quarantined together.
That's right. That's right. And the school takes pictures at lunch of what table they're at, because they know that the kids aren't going to be able to remember who they had lunch with 3 days ago. And I was like, whose genius idea was that? I mean, it's just, they're taking every precaution possible to keep the kids safe. And I have just been really, really pleased.
So on the COVID stuff, it's hard. It's super hard. My husband had a breakthrough case after Thanksgiving. So we've had two quarantines, the one very short one that Kelly was talking about, because Blake does allow a return to test if you have a negative PCR after day 5. Now the kids are vaccinated. Mine's vaccinated. He wasn't at that time because he wasn't old enough yet. But my husband had a breakthrough in November. And so then Oscar was quarantining by himself, right? Because it wasn't an exposure at school. So he didn't have a cohort. And, that was more challenging, but the classrooms are all equipped with spider cameras, the ones that go on the ceiling. And so seeing the difference between what he was experiencing versus what my daughter, who's still in MPS, was experiencing was pretty stark. At one point, I could hear Oscar in his room laughing and talking, and it was because one of his teachers, the kids were doing a small group exercise, took the computer where Oscar was and set it on the table. So he's like Max Headroom, for those of us who are old enough to remember, like sitting on the table. So he was participating in this small group discussion still. It's not to say that it was easy. I think he would still say that quarantine was terrible and horrible, but he didn't get behind academically. We didn't have any moments of like tears of frustration because he couldn't understand material. We didn't have any instances where it was hard to communicate with teachers. I was just really, from my perspective, I thought it was fairly seamless in terms of both the academic aspects and then making sure he got some social interaction during that week as well.
And I'd just like to add one more thing about COVID. The second part of the question was, are there any positive changes that might endure? I think of 2 things. In general, Blake is really good at communicating with families, and I hope that our parents here would agree with me that I think we were good at that before COVID, but we're even better at it now in terms of relevant communication, timely communication, and trying to keep our community informed about what's happening. So I think that that's a positive change. And the other one is a little bit more on the fun side, but students used to be able to have food in their lockers. So those of you that are new hopefully your kids are following the rule of no snacks between classes. But it used to be you could have snacks between classes and our hallways would get a little bit of mess because the kids would drop their snacks everywhere. So perhaps we'll get to keep moving forward with no snacks in your lockers, but I'm not sure about that. So we're getting close to almost out of time. I think I have one more question for our panelists, if they could all answer that, and then we'll wrap things up. When you were thinking about choosing a new school for your children, and this could obviously be a hard question sometimes to answer, did you look at other schools, and at the end, what were the main factors that made you feel like Blake was going to be the right fit for you?
I'll go. We did look at other schools. We looked at SPA and gosh, now I have to remember. I think we looked at Minnehaha Academy. But I think we were mostly focused on on SPA and Blake. Again, I wanted an environment that was going to be academically challenging for Oscar. I loved the athletic policy at Blake and the way the athletics work. My kiddo is not super athletically inclined. He's getting an A in gym class, which reflects the idea of like good sportsmanship is a big component of the athletic culture at Blake. And I heard that when we were looking at schools, and I've seen that in Oscar's experience, and I've really loved that. But we were also pretty focused on diversity. My husband and I, coming from Armitage, which was like 30-something% diverse, we wanted to make sure that the student body was diverse as well. But I was also asking about faculty, and I was pretty impressed with Blake's efforts to diversify the faculty. I felt like that was going to be important for Oscar at this age in his development. I think half of his teachers right now are men of color, which I was shocked by at curriculum night, pleasantly surprised. And that has been really interesting. I feel like his cohort at Blake is actually more diverse than his peer group coming out of Minneapolis. And that has been just a really an unexpected and pleasant surprise.
Okay, I can go. So we started looking at different schools, and it was during when most schools weren't doing a lot of in-person tours. We got, I think we were told we got like the last in-person tour of Blake. That was great. It was just us. So we were really looking for, I had a school I went to growing up, not in Minnesota, that their philosophy was every student is an academic, an artist, an athlete, and an activist. And so we were really looking for something like that, where our children got the opportunity to try a lot of different things and not have to specialize in one thing from, birth through high school, and that they could dabble and really see what they like. So we thought we would have that opportunity here, and they have, and we're looking forward to even more as they progress through middle school. The teachers really drew us, and then just aligning with our family values. And Lola, I echo what you said about the diversity of the teachers, but also just the conversations that they're having. I mean, my kids have come home and taught me some things that I wasn't even, I try to stay up to speed on things, but gosh, they have come home and taught me some words I didn't know before. And that's a good thing. We want that in my household. So we've been really pleased. We had anticipated looking at other schools. We had some other tours blocked. But the second my kids got in the car and said, Mom, can we go there? We actually just canceled the other ones because we just had a gut feeling that this was the right school for our kids.
Yeah, so we looked at Bragg, SBA, and obviously Lake Country was always an option. So we visited Blake, and yeah, just the vibe, and that during the visit, I don't know, I think it was Kelly who mentioned, or maybe it was Lola, how the teachers stepped out of the class and just made us very, very welcome, asked questions, and then just kind of walking around the school, and both Lola and Kelly mentioned the diversity. Obviously, just like anybody else, we probably did a little bit of research, and I mean, yeah, so you worry about a few things about going to Blake, just especially on the economic front, right? I mean, you worry about just some of the disparities and things like that, but yeah, we walk into the class, and there was none of that vibe at all, right? And so that made us feel welcome, and made us feel happy about getting our daughter in there. And so yeah, so that's just the overall environment, right? Academic rigor, and then the diversity just pushed us over the line.
Thank you to all of our panelists for your time, your honest answers, your thoughtful answers. We're just so grateful to have you here today with us, and for you sharing your perspective. Just wanted to put up my last slide, and we have no more questions in the chat, so we've done well. We've kept within our allotted hour. But again, and I'm so glad all of you brought up the chance to just come and see the school, right? So you're welcome to tour. You can sign up through our admissions portal. The admissions portal is your chance to sign up for events and tours. You can also just please send me an email or give me a call. Our applications are due on January 31st for decisions to be sent out on April 1st. But between now and then, we're happy to connect you with members of our parent community, our faculty, our administrator. We all want to help you all make the best decision for your family and your kids. So please do reach out to us at any time. And I think with that, we'll call it a day.